This is the first portion of a lecture on the diversity of kingdom Animalia from August 31st, 2020. And we've already talked about the different domains listed here, so domain archaea and bacteria, and we've been making our way through domain eukarya, or the eukaryotes, and we've talked about fungi and plants and what makes them unique and as kingdoms, and we're going to talk a little bit about Animalia, or the animals, today. And so all animals share several characteristics. The first of which is being eukaryotic, or having nuclei and organelles in their cells. Animals are also all multicellular, or made up of many cells. But this is similar to plants, right? And so there are some things that distinguish an animal from a plant. One of which is the fact that animals are motile, or that they can move, whereas plants are sessile and cannot. Additionally, plants are phototrophic, right, and make their own food from light, whereas animals are heterotrophic, or get their energy from different organic sources. Animals also reproduce sexually, and animals have sort of specialized body tissues, as well as a determinate body shape or plan. And in order to classify animals into groups, we use several different kind of hallmarks or characteristics. And the first of those is what's known as morphology, or the physical traits, or how an animal looks. And specifically, we use body symmetry, which is basically the shape or the body plan of the animal. And you can see here in this phylogenetic tree that we have all animals at the beginning of kind of the earliest time point on the left. And then they're divided into groups based on whether they have tissues or whether they don't. And so everything down here on this branch would not have tissues, so basically the sponges. And then everything up here off this branch and all of the subsequent branches does have specialized tissues. And then at the next branch point here, you can see we've grouped animals by symmetry, where these animals up top, including the chordates, echinoderms, all of these worms, have what's known as bilateral symmetry, which is if you slice them directly down the midline or through like the nose of a human, you have two equal sides. Whereas these organisms down here have what is known as radial symmetry. And so morphology is something that we can see and look at, and it makes some classifications or groupings of organisms easy. But then in order to really start whittling down these groups, just looking at whether or not they have tissues or not is not really specific enough to start making distinctions between, say, an arthropod up here and a chordate over here. And so we also have to incorporate the idea of development and how these organisms develop when classifying animals. And so the ones up here develop differently than the ones down here at this branch point. And finally, development is still something that we can see on a macroscopic level. But if we really want to make distinctions between what an arthropod and a roundworm are, or distinctions between different types of worms here, we have to look at the molecular level and look at the DNA sequences. And by comparing DNA sequences, we can kind of group animals together, as well as find differences between their DNA sequence that allows us to classify them into different groups. And so we started doing this classification and grouping of animals with just looking at the way that they look, or their physical traits or morphology. And as technology improved, we were able to now identify new species that we didn't know existed because of DNA or molecular differences between two groups of animals that we thought were the same.